FedEx shouldn't exist, but one blackjack bet changed everything. The company was days from collapse when its founder took FedEx's last $5,000 to Vegas. One gamble, one hand of cards. How did it save a $90 billion empire? FedEx is one of the most powerful names in global business. Every day, millions of packages move across continents in planes and trucks stamped with that famous purple and orange logo. But this massive empire, it didn't appear overnight. It started as a wild idea from a young entrepreneur named Fred Smith, a man who believed the world needed packages delivered faster than anyone thought possible. Investors told him it would never work, the costs were insane, the technology barely existed. And yet, Fred was determined to build a company that could deliver overnight, no matter the distance. What nobody knew was just how close that dream came to dying, or the extreme lengths Fred would go to keep it alive. Because FedEx wasn't only a business idea, it was a fight for survival that would test one man's belief against impossible odds. Before FedEx became a global powerhouse, it existed only as a college paper. A young man named Fred Smith sat in a Yale classroom, staring at a blank page. The assignment was simple: write a paper on a business solution to a real-world problem. Fred started thinking about the future, about how the world was getting faster, businesses moving across state lines, factories depending on parts arriving on time, and yet shipping was painfully slow. If you wanted to send something across the country, you were lucky if it arrived in 3 days. Sometimes it took a week. Fred imagined a system where packages could move overnight, anywhere in America, no matter the distance, no matter the weather. His professor read the paper and gave him an average grade, because back then, everyone thought Fred's idea was impossible. How could you guarantee overnight shipping when planes were expensive, fuel costs were unpredictable, and there was no technology to track packages from start to finish? Investors laughed him out of the room. Bankers refused to fund him. Friends told him he was insane. But he believed that businesses would pay almost anything to move critical packages faster than the competition, and he was willing to risk his future and his family's fortune to prove it. In 1971, Fred took $4 million he'd inherited after his father passed away and convinced investors to add a few million more. He used that money to lease 14 Dassault Falcons, sleek jets that could carry cargo faster than commercial planes. He hired pilots, mechanics, and ramp workers and launched a tiny network flying out of Memphis, Tennessee. At first, the planes flew half empty. Packages trickled in slowly, costs were sky high. Fred was burning through cash faster than anyone predicted. But he refused to quit because he knew overnight delivery wasn't just a service, it was an entirely new way for businesses to operate. Contracts, spare parts, medical supplies, life-saving medicine. Fred believed the world couldn't survive without speed. Despite every warning, every banker shaking their head, despite friends begging him to give up, Fred Smith launched Federal Express into the skies. It was bold, it was visionary, and it was about to crash harder than anyone imagined. By 1973, FedEx was airborne, but sinking fast. Every night, Fred Smith's planes crisscrossed the skies, carrying packages between cities. But there was one big problem. The company was losing money faster than it could make it. Pilots, they needed salaries, planes burned expensive jet fuels, maintenance crews kept engines running, and every airport stop, that meant fees and paperwork. Even with all the vision in the world, the numbers were brutal. In those early months, FedEx sometimes moved fewer than 200 packages a night. The revenue was nowhere near covering the costs. Then, the worst possible storm hit. In October 1973, the Arab oil embargo led to a sudden surge in fuel prices. Gasoline, jet fuel, everything became outrageously expensive. Some airlines doubled ticket prices just to survive, but FedEx, they didn't have ticket sales to fall back on, only packages, and there weren't enough of those. Suddenly, the company's fuel bill skyrocketed to tens of thousands of dollars a week, money that wasn't there. The business was bleeding red ink, millions in losses. Fred raced from bank to bank, pitching desperate pleas for loans. But lenders looked at this tiny air cargo operation with no track record and shook their heads. You're losing too much money. There's no proof overnight shipping can ever work. Investors stopped answering Fred's calls. Suppliers started demanding payment up front. Meanwhile, employees continued to show up each night, loading boxes, fueling planes, and flying empty skies. Fred refused to show fear, but behind the scenes, he was exhausted, terrified. The weight of hundreds of jobs sat on his shoulders, while the bank account emptied by the hour. There were nights he barely slept, running numbers over and over, searching for any way to keep the planes in the air. Week after week, FedEx fell closer to bankruptcy. The strain was relentless. One Monday morning, the finance team delivered the news Fred had been dreading. The company's bank account held just $5,000. Not enough for another week of fuel. Not enough to pay suppliers. The founder stared at those numbers, realizing FedEx was days, maybe hours, from dying. And Fred Smith was about to do something no business school would ever recommend. Because when your dream is on life support, sometimes you have to bet it all. He walked into a casino carrying FedEx's last $5,000. It wasn't some wild vacation. It was a mission to save the company. Smith headed straight for the blackjack tables. He knew he couldn't risk FedEx on luck alone, but he could turn $5,000 into enough for one more week of fuel. Maybe the company would live long enough for another shot at survival. He sat down, chips stacked in front of him, cards shuffling under bright casino lights. Hand after hand, he bet, doubled down, and watched the pile grow. The tension was electric. Every card felt like a matter of life or death. When he finally stood up, he was holding $27,000, enough to keep FedEx's planes in the air for at least a few more days. Fred flew back to Memphis, deposited the cash into the company's account, and didn't immediately tell anyone where it came from. To employees and vendors, it seemed like a miracle. Fuel trucks arrived, flights kept operating. But inside, Smith knew FedEx wasn't saved yet. He'd only bought precious time. The company was still millions in debt, and the future was anything but certain. Yet, that single night in Vegas, that desperate bet, might have kept FedEx alive long enough for the real turnaround to begin. Because sometimes, the thin line between failure and a billion-dollar empire comes down to one crazy roll of the dice. The debts were still suffocating, fuel bills stacked up again, and suppliers were growing impatient. Fred knew that the only way out was to raise real money, millions. So he hit the road again and again. He pitched his idea to investors. He stood in boardrooms, showing maps and explaining how overnight shipping could transform American business. But most people still thought he was crazy. It'll never work. No one needs packages overnight. And you're losing money faster than anyone's ever seen. Meeting after meeting, it ended the same way, with Fred leaving empty-handed. Meanwhile, the employees kept working, planes kept flying, but everyone was waiting for the day FedEx would shut its doors for good. And yet, Smith refused to stop. He fine-tuned the business plans, found cheaper fuel deals, cut costs wherever he could. He started explaining FedEx's value in a new way. Imagine your factory's assembly line stops because a single part is missing, or a hospital waits for life-saving medicine. Overnight shipping isn't a luxury, it's survival. Slowly, some investors began to listen. By mid-1974, Fred convinced General Dynamics, the aerospace giant, to invest millions of dollars. It wasn't enough to pay off every debt, but it gave FedEx just enough runway to keep flying. Meanwhile, the volume of packages finally began to grow. More businesses began trusting FedEx to deliver critical shipments. And there was another secret weapon. Smith's team pioneered a tracking system that allowed customers to see exactly where their package was in real time. No one else in the shipping world offered that kind of visibility. Overnight delivery became fast and reliable. Slowly, losses shrank, then incredibly, FedEx turned its first monthly profit. It had taken years, millions in losses, and one unforgettable night in Vegas. But Fred Smith's impossible idea was finally starting to work, and FedEx was on its way to becoming an empire. By the mid-1980s, it was moving hundreds of thousands of packages a day. By the 90s, millions. Today, FedEx operates one of the largest air fleets in the world, with over 650 cargo planes crisscrossing the skies. Its trucks travel more than 3 million miles every single day. The company handles nearly 15 million shipments daily, connecting over 220 countries and territories. Annual revenue? Over $90 billion, all built on an idea most people thought was impossible. Fred Smith became a legend in the business world. He was honored by the Smithsonian. He was awarded the Peter Peterson Award for business statesmanship. He also served as an advisor on defense and logistics to multiple US presidents. But he always remembered those early days, flying half-empty planes, burning cash, and staring down bankruptcy. FedEx has played a part in wars, rushing supplies to troops in the Middle East. It delivers critical aid during hurricanes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. During the COVID-19 pandemic, FedEx became a lifeline, shipping millions of vaccines and protective equipment worldwide. And through it all, Smith's vision never wavered. That speed and certainty could change the world. The Vegas bet has become a legend in its own right, a story told in business schools, articles, and boardrooms everywhere. Because it wasn't just a wild gamble, it was a symbol of what it takes to build something extraordinary, even when the odds say you'll fail. One desperate bet kept FedEx alive long enough to become an empire that changed how the world does business. And next time you see a purple and orange truck rolling past, remember, it might not exist at all if Fred Smith hadn't bet it all on blackjack. Fred Smith's net worth is approximately $5.5 billion today. However, those numbers don't reveal how close it all came to never having existed. Because if that one blackjack bet had gone the other way, FedEx could have vanished in the first year. And without FedEx, overnight shipping might have been delayed for decades, e-commerce might have grown more slowly, entire industries that depend on lightning-fast deliveries might not even exist. That's how fragile business history can be. A single moment rippling outward like a butterfly's wings. A simple decision, a roll of the dice, can reshape how the entire world works. In the end, FedEx isn't just a shipping company. It's proof that sometimes the craziest risks create the biggest transformations. And that one desperate bet quietly changed the future of global business.